The light bulb flickered once, twice, then gave up with a soft hiss. Daniel Brooks stood in the dark, his hand still frozen on the switch. The living room had gone dim, save for the glow of the microwave clock, 4:32 a.m. Of course, he muttered. The power hadn't gone out. Not yet. Just the last decent bulb in their two-bedroom apartment. The one that lit the room where his son slept on a pull-out couch that squeaked every time he moved. The room where Daniel counted bills more than blessings. The room that hadn't seen peace in years. He reached for the flashlight, duct-taped to the side of the fridge. It worked, barely casting a weak yellow cone across the cluttered kitchen table, unpaid bills, an empty cereal box, and a calendar with too many red marks. The cold November air leaked through the cracked window, but he didn't dare turn on the heat. The gas bill was already 2 weeks late. He'd called and begged for an extension. They gave him 4 days. 3 had passed. Daniel didn't need an alarm anymore. His body knew the rhythm of desperation: up before dawn, out the door before sunrise, 3 jobs stitched together like a fraying lifeline. Warehouse cleaning crew and weekend shifts, fixing cars at a garage that paid under the table. It wasn't a life. It was survival. A series of calculations where emotion had no space. He moved through the apartment silently, trying not to wake Eli. The boy had a big test that morning, something about geometry. Daniel hadn't touched geometry in 20 years. He barely remembered how to fill out the FAFSA form for Eli's school. He poured the last of the coffee grounds into the machine, muttering a quiet prayer to the caffeine gods. The appliance gurgled, steamed, and sputtered to life, struggling like everything else around here. Daniel leaned against the counter, rubbing his temples. His hands were calloused. His back ached. His knees cracked when he bent too far. He was 37 but felt 60. "You ever get the feeling life's a game you never even got the rules for?" he said aloud, though no one was there to hear it. "Yeah." A sleepy voice came from the couch behind him. "But you're still playing it, Dad." Daniel turned. Eli sat up, hair-tousled blanket around his shoulders like a cape. His eyes were half closed, but the smirk was real. "You were supposed to be asleep." "You were supposed to turn on the light," Eli shot back. "Did it finally die?" "Yup. You'll have to suffer through math homework by flashlight again tonight." Tragic. Daniel managed a grin. His son was what kept him upright. Always had been. Even when the lights dimmed. Even when the eviction notices came. Even when his ex walked out 5 years ago and never looked back. He crossed the room, crouched down, and kissed Eli's forehead. "Get some rest. I've got the morning shift. I'll be back by dinner." "Warehouse or cleaning?" "Cleaning today, then the garage." Eli yawned. "Can you bring back that donut from Mr. Cooper's if he's in a good mood?" "That's a no." "Huh," Daniel laughed low and tired. "Go to sleep." He grabbed his coat 2 sizes too big, thrifted from a church bin, and headed out the door, down 4 flights of stairs, because the elevator had been broken since July. The Nashville air bit hard against his face. Breath fogged in front of him as he walked to the bus stop, boots hitting cracked pavement. His world was steel gray and tired. The city barely stirred. When he made it to the office building, he cleaned. He swiped his badge and entered silence. The kind of sterile quiet that only rich people got to enjoy. He emptied trash cans full of untouched lunches, scrubbed toilets that sparkled and mopped floors no one looked at, but everyone expected to gleam. At 9:00 a.m. sharp, he clocked out, caught another bus, and headed to the garage. By 10:00, his hands were deep in engine grease, his mind numb from routine. 1 hour, then 2, then 5. By the time the sun began to set, Daniel's body was wrecked. He limped onto the last bus of the day, dropped into the plastic seat like a man twice his age, and stared out the window at the orange-drenched sky. Maybe tomorrow would be different. Maybe not. When he reached the apartment, the first thing he noticed was that the hallway was too quiet. No noise from the neighbors. No smell of microwave dinners. Just a strange, still silence. The second thing he noticed was the envelope taped to his door. Cream-colored, thick, embossed with gold lettering. Brooks Daniel. His stomach clenched. Eviction final notice. A lawsuit. He peeled it from the door, heart pounding. The envelope was heavy, too formal for any debt collector. He fumbled with the seal, opened it, and read, "Dear Mr. Brooks, you have been named the sole beneficiary in the estate of Lorraine Davis, deceased as of October 3rd of this year." The paper trembled in his hands. Lorraine Davis. His grandmother. The name pulled something buried and brittle from the back of his memory, a photo in a shoebox. A warm laugh, a jar of honey on a windowsill. He hadn't seen her since he was 6. His mother had never spoken of her again. "We don't talk about her," she'd said once, curt and final. So why now? Why him? He pushed open the apartment door, still holding the letter. Eli looked up from the couch, mid-bite of a peanut butter sandwich. "What's that?" Daniel didn't answer right away. He stepped into the room like a man who'd stepped into someone else's life. "She's gone," he said softly. "My grandma. Your great-grandma. Lorraine." Eli blinked. "I didn't even know you had a grandma." "Me neither," Daniel whispered. Then he looked at the letter again. "She left me a house in Georgia. Fitzgerald, Georgia." Eli slowly put his sandwich down. "That's random." "Yeah." Daniel sank into the nearest chair. "This doesn't make sense. Why me?" "Why now?" Eli picked up the envelope, scanned it. "It says we have to go there. In person." Daniel didn't respond. He didn't have gas money. He didn't have vacation time. He didn't even have clean clothes for a trip. But somewhere in his chest, something stirred, a feeling he hadn't allowed himself in years. Curiosity, possibility, and the tiniest flicker of hope. That night, long after Eli had gone to sleep, Daniel sat alone in the dark living room, rereading the letter under flashlight. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. And inside, the past knocked. Not loudly, just enough to be heard. Daniel sat on the edge of his bed the next morning, the letter from the law office crumpled slightly in his hand. He'd read it 5 times already. Still didn't make it feel any more real. Lorraine Davis, his grandmother. Gone for over a month now, apparently. The name stirred something in him, soft, foggy images from a time before things got hard. A warm kitchen, a woman humming an old tune, the scent of something sweet and citrusy in the air. It wasn't a full memory, more like a shadow of one. His mother had erased Lorraine from their lives so completely, he wasn't sure if those moments were real or wishful. Eli appeared in the doorway, hair wet from the shower, a half-eaten granola bar in hand. "You calling them?" he asked, nodding toward the envelope on Daniel's lap. Daniel didn't look up. "Yeah, I guess I have to. It's not like we've got a lot to lose, right?" Daniel gave a tired chuckle. "That's one way to look at it." Eli walked over and dropped onto the mattress beside him. "Sometimes the people we forget are the ones who remembered us most." Daniel turned to him, surprised. "You get that from a song lyric." Eli shrugged. Probably. Doesn't make it less true. Daniel held the envelope a little tighter. All right. Let's see what this is really about. He picked up his phone and dialed the number on the letter. The receptionist who answered had the practiced calm of someone who handled big things every day. Kensington and Associates. This is Madeline speaking. How may I direct your call? I got a letter about an estate. My name's Daniel Brooks. There was a brief pause. One moment, Mr. Brooks. I'll connect you to Mr. Kensington's office. A click. Then another. Then a warm, gravelly voice filled the line. Mr. Brooks. Good morning. This is Howard Kensington. I assume you've received our notice, yeah. Just caught me off guard, that's all. I understand. Grief and surprise rarely walk separate paths. Your grandmother, Lorraine Davis, was quite clear in her wishes. You are her sole beneficiary. Daniel rubbed his temple. We hadn't spoken in over 30 years. I didn't even know she was still alive. That's not uncommon in these kinds of estrangements. What matters now is that she left you a property. Quite a significant one, I might add. In Fitzgerald, Georgia. What kind of property? A private estate. Originally owned by the late Kenny Rogers. Your grandmother was his housekeeper for over 5 decades. Daniel blinked. Wait, the Kenny Rogers. The singer, the very one. The property is approximately 12,000 square feet situated on 47 acres. It's been unoccupied for about 2 years since your grandmother entered assisted care. She passed on October 3rd. We've been attempting to reach next of kin since. Daniel sat back in his chair. It felt like someone had unplugged the world around him. She lived in a mansion for years and never told anyone Lorraine was private, Kensington said carefully. But she made arrangements for everything to pass directly to you. I can't just take off work and come to Georgia. I've got a kid, 3 jobs. I can't even afford the bus fare. There was silence on the line, then a soft rustle of paper. We can offer a video call, temporarily, but we will eventually need your presence in person. Documents must be signed. The property must be evaluated by you in accordance with her will. Daniel looked at Eli, who raised his eyebrows in silent encouragement. Okay, Daniel said. Video call. When tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. I'll have my associate Clara Wade send the link to your email. Do you have access? Daniel winced. At the library. I can use my son's school tablet. That works. We'll see you then, Mr. Brooks. The line disconnected. Daniel let the phone fall onto the mattress. I can't believe this, he whispered. Eli leaned over, eyes wide. She worked for Kenny Rogers. Apparently. And now we might own his old house, apparently. Eli grinned. You think there's like gold records in there, Daniel chuckled. Probably just cobwebs and old furniture. But his heart wasn't as sure. The next morning, Daniel dressed in his cleanest shirt and ironed jeans, wrinkled but passable. He and Eli set up the school tablet on the kitchen table. A single crack down the center of the screen glowed faintly as they joined the video link. The screen lit up with a face. A woman, maybe early 30s, with sharp eyes and soft curls tucked into a bun. She smiled warmly. Mr. Brooks, I'm Clara Wade, associate to Mr. Kensington. He'll join us shortly. Nice to meet you, Daniel said. This is my son, Eli. Hi, Eli offered with a wave. Hello, Eli, she replied kindly. I'm glad you could join. This may be a lot to take in. Howard Kensington joined moments later, adjusting his glasses and nodding politely. Let's begin, he said. Daniel, your grandmother. Lorraine was not just an employee. She was a confidant to Kenny Rogers for over 50 years. In 2017, as part of her retirement, he deeded the Fitzgerald estate to her, legally, fully. She chose not to sell it. Instead, she maintained it until her health declined. Daniel asked, "Why me? Why not my mother?" Kensington's expression softened. Your mother, from what I gather, severed ties with Lorraine decades ago. There's history there. But Lorraine left a letter for you in her handwriting. I am required to give it to you in person. Daniel swallowed hard. She knew me, she spoke of you often. She had your school photos, apparently. Kept them all these years. He didn't know what to say. His throat tightened. Clara jumped in. The house is structurally intact but needs significant repairs. Taxes are in arrears roughly $11,000. It's not a turnkey inheritance. It's a commitment. But it's also a gift. Eli leaned in. Do we have to decide now? No, Clara said. In fact, we urge you not to. You need to see it for yourself. Kensington added, there is more. But it's best you see the property in person. Daniel nodded slowly. We'll find a way to come down. Might take a week or so. Clara smiled. We'll be here. After the call, Daniel sat at the table for a long time. Eli didn't speak. He just waited, knowing his dad needed space to breathe. Finally, Daniel exhaled. I think we're going to Georgia. That night, Daniel and Eli made sandwiches, packed a duffel bag, and counted their last $80 in cash. Daniel stared out the window, heart pounding. He wasn't sure what they were driving toward, but for the first time in years, he wasn't running from something. He was heading towards something, and whatever it was, it had waited decades to be found. The road narrowed into something barely paved, the GPS stuttering, as if unsure whether they were still on Earth. Trees thickened on either side of the cracked asphalt, arching overhead like green bones, casting long, crooked shadows across the windshield. Daniel gripped the steering wheel tighter, eyes scanning the stretch ahead for signs, any sign that they were headed toward civilization and not deeper into the woods. Eli sat beside him, legs pulled up in the passenger seat, hoodie over his head, earbuds in. But every few minutes, he glanced out the window, like he was trying to convince himself this wasn't a mistake. You sure this is right? Daniel asked for maybe the 5th time. Eli pulled out one earbud and looked at the glitching GPS. I mean, it's either here or Narnia. We passed the last gas station like 40 minutes ago. The car bumped over a pothole, making everything in the back seat rattle. A box of snacks, a duffel bag, a rusted tire iron. Great, Daniel muttered. We inherit a mansion and can't even afford a suspension system. The GPS blipped, once froze, then died. They were officially off the grid. A few more minutes passed in thick silence until suddenly, there it was. The trees parted like a curtain, and in the clearing beyond, sitting heavy and quiet like a giant fallen asleep, was the house. Eli leaned forward. Whoa. Daniel slowed the car, his breath catching. It looked like something from an old Southern Gothic novel. Towering white pillars, a wraparound porch sagging at the corners, shuttered windows like closed eyes. Nature had started to reclaim it, ivy crawling up the brick vines, wrapping the porch posts, grass up to the knees of forgotten statues in the yard. And yet even in its decay, it had presence, authority, like it knew it was still important. Daniel parked the car in the gravel circle out front and killed the engine. For a moment, neither of them moved. Eli broke the silence first. People like us don't inherit castles, we inherit chaos. Daniel looked at him. Deep. I've been saving that one. They stepped out of the car. The air was heavy with heat, and something older dust earth, maybe the memory of firewood. A bird called sharply in the distance, breaking the quiet. Daniel found the envelope Clara had given him before they left, a labeled set of keys. He picked the largest one and approached the front door. The lock was new. Someone had clearly installed it recently. It took a bit of jiggling, but eventually, with a loud metallic clunk, it gave way. The door creaked open on its hinges. Inside the house was dark and cool. It smelled like wood, old books, and time itself. They stepped into a grand foyer, where a massive chandelier loomed overhead, half the bulbs burned out. A staircase curled up to the left like a frozen wave. Furniture lay draped in yellowing sheets. Dust floated in the air like ash. Daniel clicked on his flashlight and swept it across the room. Paintings lined the walls, some landscapes, some portraits. One caught his eye, a black and white photograph in a silver frame. A man with a beard and cowboy hat stood beside a woman in an apron, both laughing at something off camera. He walked closer. His heart jumped. That was Kenny Rogers, and next to him, Lorraine. She looked younger, maybe 40, proud, grounded, and happy. Daniel stared at the photo like it could answer all the questions suddenly thundering in his chest. She really was here, he said aloud. She really lived in this house. Eli wandered into the adjacent room, a grand sitting area judging by the fireplace the size of a small car. Dad, he called. Come look at this. Daniel followed, stepping carefully on the creaking floorboards. Eli was standing by a table where several thick, bound books were stacked. Guest logs, ledgers. One was open. Daniel leaned in. The names were signed in looping famous scrawls. Musicians, actors, politicians. Some Daniel recognized. Others were just initials protected by time. She knew all these people, Eli said softly. Daniel nodded, flipping a page. Then another. He stopped when he saw a small, folded note tucked between the pages. He picked it up carefully. The handwriting was neat, elegant. Faded ink. Daniel. I always hoped you'd walk through this house one day. Not because of the money, not even the memories, but because I wanted you to know I was real, that I existed, and that I waited. There's more here than dust. Look closely. Lorraine Daniel swallowed hard. His fingers trembled as he read the note again. She waited. Eli looked up at him. You okay? I don't know. Daniel admitted. She was a ghost my whole life. And now, she's everywhere. They explored more of the house, moving room to room. The kitchen was massive, outdated, but intact. The library smelled like leather and pipe smoke. Bedrooms full of antiques and silence. Every space whispered of lives lived just out of reach. In one of the upstairs bedrooms, Daniel found a box under the bed. Old photo albums, letters tied in ribbon, a cassette tape labeled 1998, Thanksgiving. Back downstairs, the sun had started to set. Long golden beams poured through the blinds, making the dust look like falling stars. Eli stood at the edge of the living room, staring at a tall bookshelf built into the wall. Something's weird about this, he said. Daniel walked over. Weird how I don't know. The floorboards in front of it are different. Like someone's been here more recently than the rest of the house. Daniel examined it more closely. Sure enough, there were faint scuff marks on the floor, like the bookshelf had been moved. He tried to push it. It didn't budge. He ran his hand along the side, the shelves, the top edge. Nothing obvious. Maybe it's just stuck, Eli offered. Or maybe it's hiding something. They exchanged a glance. Daniel stepped back. We'll figure it out tomorrow. For now, we find where we're sleeping. Eli pointed to the giant, dust-covered couch. I called dibs. Daniel chuckled and looked around one last time. His grandmother had left a lot more than just a house. She'd left stories, secrets, maybe something she was never able to say in person. And in that silence, he felt something shift, something begin. Later that night, as Daniel lay awake on a creaking guest bed, he heard something faint like footsteps above him. But there was no one else in the house. Just the echoes of what came before and the weight of everything they were about to uncover. Rain came in the early morning, soft at first, then steadily louder until it drummed against the roof like fingers tapping on a table. Daniel sat at the edge of the guest bed, hands clasped, eyes fixed on the hallway outside his door. He hadn't slept much. His mind had been running all night, replaying that note from Lorraine, the photo with Kenny Rogers, the scuff marks in front of the bookcase. Something about this house made the past feel like it wasn't over yet. He heard footsteps again. Light. Shifting. Faint creaks on old wood. But when he stepped into the hall and checked every room upstairs, there was nothing. No one. Just shadows. He went downstairs, where Eli had fallen asleep under a mountain of blankets on the couch, the glow of his phone lighting up his face. The boy looked peaceful even here, even now. Daniel envied that. He poured himself a glass of water from the old kitchen sink and opened the back door to get some air. The smell of rain-soaked earth hit him immediately. Across the yard, the trees swayed under the weight of the storm. Somewhere out there, deeper than the eye could see, the forest held onto secrets. Just like the house. A crack of thunder rolled across the horizon. Daniel stepped back inside and closed the door. By 9:00 a.m., they had eaten stale toaster pastries and decided to keep exploring the house. I want to see the attic, Eli said. Daniel raised an eyebrow. The attic. You know how movies go. Old houses always hide stuff in the attic. I think you've watched too many ghost stories. Yeah, well, you heard those footsteps too. Daniel didn't answer, but his silence said enough. They climbed the creaky stairs to the third floor, where a narrow hallway led to a square door in the ceiling with a pull string. Daniel grabbed it and tugged gently. The ladder unfolded with a groan. Ladies first, Eli said. Daniel gave him a look, then climbed up into the attic. It was musty, packed with boxes, dust, and things no one had touched in decades. A spinning wheel sat in the corner next to an old phonograph and a trunk labeled Winter '84. Yellowed newspapers were stacked in one corner, all headlines about Kenny concerts, interviews, even one announcing a lawsuit that was later dismissed. Eli poked around, then froze by a large wooden chest. Dad. Daniel turned, the hair on his arms rising. Check this out. Inside the chest were more photographs. Dozens of them. All featuring Lorraine. Some in uniform, others in plain clothes. Always in the background. Always working. But the strange thing was, Kenny was in nearly all of them. Sometimes casual, other times dressed to the nines, laughing with her, toasting her at parties. She wasn't just cleaning up after someone's life, Daniel murmured, holding one of the photos up to the light. She was part of it. Eli sat back on his heels. You think she and Kenny were like... Close, Daniel didn't answer immediately. They must have trusted each other. Look at this. He pulled out a photo where Lorraine was holding a baby. On the back, scribbled in faded ink, Daniel, age 2. His breath caught. She had known him, loved him. watched him grow from a distance. Eli noticed his father's face shift. "You okay?" "Yeah," Daniel said softly. "It's just, no one ever told me any of this. Not my mom. Not anyone." They stayed up there another hour sorting through boxes. One contained birthday cards Lorraine never sent, each labeled by year. Some had little notes inside, encouragements, words of wisdom, jokes she would have told him if she'd been allowed. And then under all the paper and dust, they found something strange, a small black notebook. Daniel opened it. Inside were pages of entries written in a sharp, steady hand. January 14th, 1992. KR told me today that if anything ever happened to him, the Fitzgerald property was to be mine. I laughed, thought he was kidding, but he looked me dead in the eye and said, "You've earned every acre more than I ever did." June 2003. Daniel's birthday today. Wonder if he still likes toy trains. Sent a card to his school, but I think Marlene intercepted it. Maybe one day he'll understand. Daniel read in silence, heart growing heavier with every entry. Eli leaned closer. "She never stopped thinking about you." No, she didn't. Eventually, they made their way back downstairs. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still a heavy gray. As Daniel passed through the living room, he paused again at the bookshelf. "She said to pay attention to what felt out of place," he said under his breath. He ran his fingers along the spines of the books. Some were fake, hollow wooden props meant for aesthetics. Others were real. He pulled one off the shelf, The Gambler by Kenny Rogers. "Didn't know he wrote a book," Eli said. Daniel held it up. It looked too clean, too new compared to the others. He flipped it open. Nothing unusual at first, just pages, quotes, stories. Then something caught his eye. The last few pages had been glued together. "Give me a knife." Eli handed him a pocket knife, and Daniel carefully separated the pages. Inside was a tiny switch. He looked at Eli. "Ready," Eli grinned. "Born ready." Daniel flipped the switch. With a soft mechanical click, the entire bookcase shifted an inch forward. Dust spilled down. A hidden door revealed itself, set into the wall behind it, solid steel, with a small fingerprint scanner beside the handle. They stared at it in stunned silence. "Is that a vault?" Eli asked. Daniel nodded slowly. "Looks like it." Above the scanner was a small plaque with engraved script for Lorraine and hers. Daniel swallowed hard. His pulse kicked up. He pressed his finger to the scanner. The light blinked red, then green. With a hiss of hydraulics, the lock disengaged. The door didn't open completely, just enough to show the faint shimmer of a metallic room inside. Cool air rushed out, dry and sterile. They looked at each other. "I think this is it," Daniel whispered. But before they stepped inside the porch, floorboards creaked. They both turned to the front windows. A figure stood at the edge of the yard, watching, then vanished into the trees. Daniel didn't move. Neither did Eli. They both stood frozen by the bookshelf, eyes locked on the front window, where the figure had just been. "Did you see that?" Eli whispered. "Yeah," Daniel said, voice low. "I saw." He crossed the room and stepped up to the window, peering out into the trees. Nothing. Just wind brushing through the branches, leaves rustling like quiet whispers. Whoever it was, if someone had been there, was gone now. Or hiding. Daniel locked the front door, then checked the back. Could have been a neighbor, Eli offered, though he didn't sound convinced. Maybe, Daniel muttered, but I didn't like how they were watching. They returned to the hidden vault, the heavy steel door now ajar, waiting like an open mouth. Eli stepped in first. The space was cold, temperature-controlled. A small motion light flicked on, revealing rows of built-in cabinets, shelves lined with folders and plastic storage bins sealed tight. It didn't look like some secret treasure room. It looked like a private archive. Daniel followed, running his fingers across the smooth surface of a file drawer. "What is this place?" Eli asked, wide-eyed. Daniel exhaled slowly. "This isn't just storage. This is intentional. Organized." He spotted a small black keypad by the inner wall. A screen glowed to life as he touched it, green font on a black background. "Welcome, Lorraine," it read. He navigated through the simple menu. Assets, deeds, legal, insurance, investments. Daniel opened the assets folder. The first file was labeled Cash Reserves. Inside, a clear plastic envelope with $50,000 in neatly stacked $100 bills, all banded and dated. Legitimate. Crisp. Eli blinked. Dad. I see it. Underneath another folder. Safety box, jewelry coins, watches, more sealed envelopes with appraisals attached. "This isn't inheritance," Daniel said slowly. "This is wealth. Structured wealth. She built something here." He opened another drawer marked Property Holdings. Multiple deeds. Some dating back to the early 2000s. Most were in Georgia. A few in Tennessee. One in Kentucky. All in Lorraine's name. All clear. Eli grabbed a folder and opened it. Inside were glossy photos of the mansion from various decades. Parties, renovation work. Lorraine and Kenny posing near a finished fountain. Eli whistled low. She was running this whole place, like a boss. Daniel smiled at that, despite the knot in his chest. She wasn't just a housekeeper, he said. She was a partner. That's when they noticed a second door. Smaller, heavy, bolted with an old-fashioned combination dial. No fingerprint scanner this time. A yellow envelope was taped to the front. Daniel pulled it down and opened it carefully. Inside, a handwritten note. Daniel. If you've made it this far, then you already know this wasn't about keeping things from you. It was about giving you the chance to find it yourself. That vault holds what I couldn't talk about when I was alive. My share. My truth. The combination is your birthday. I never forgot. Use it wisely. Don't let it use you. Lorraine Daniel stared at the note for a long time, then slowly crouched in front of the dial. Your birthday? Eli asked. Daniel nodded. April 17th, 1985. He turned the dial, each number clicking into place with a weight that felt almost sacred. The final turn landed with a soft clunk. Daniel pulled the handle. The second vault opened. It wasn't a room, more like a walk-in safe. And inside was something that made both of them go silent. Stacks of vintage bearer bonds, sealed manila envelopes marked with trust numbers, rows of gold coins in mint tubes, stock certificates framed in protective glass, and multiple small black boxes filled with jewelry, emerald rings, diamond brooches, watches older than both of them combined. Daniel stepped in and felt the air change. Cold. Still. Like time had stopped here years ago. What is this even worth? Eli asked. Daniel didn't answer. He picked up an old ledger resting on a glass shelf. The numbers written inside were meticulous. Dates, transfers, calculations. By the last page, he found the total estimated assets, $265,000. Daniel's knees buckled slightly. He sat on a bench just outside the vault, heart pounding. Dad, Eli said, alarmed. I'm okay, Daniel breathed. Just processing. How did she? How could she even? Daniel flipped the ledger back a few pages. There it was, a short paragraph written in Lorraine's careful pen. KR made me silent co-owner of all secondary real estate ventures in 2001. He said I knew how to spot good land better than any of his investors. He was right. I never spent the money. I never trusted the system to let a woman like me live with it out loud. But I built a legacy anyway. This is it. If you're reading this, Daniel, it's yours now. Just promise me one thing, stay you. Don't let this erase who you are. Daniel felt tears prick at the edge of his eyes. All those years she had watched from the sidelines. All those years she held back, not because she had nothing, but because she had everything to lose. And she'd waited. She had waited for him. He closed the ledger and looked at Eli. We need to talk to Kensington. Today. Yeah, Eli said, still wide-eyed. But, Dad. Daniel turned to follow his son's gaze. The tablet on the table in the living room buzzed. Eli walked over and picked it up. One unread notification from a local news app. Nashville single father inherits Kenny Rogers' hidden fortune, who is Daniel Brooks. Daniel's stomach dropped. No, he whispered. Dad. Eli turned the screen toward him. There were photos of the house. A picture of him and Eli from a local school fundraiser. A blurry shot of their car arriving in Fitzgerald. Someone had been watching. And now the world knew. Daniel slowly backed away from the tablet, the full weight of it crashing down on him. Everything had changed. Outside, the wind picked up again. This time it carried something different. Not just weather, but attention. They weren't alone anymore, and the past had officially collided with the present. Daniel shut the tablet with a force he instantly regretted. The screen cracked down the middle, a spiderweb fracture, now etched into the image of his own face beside the headline. God, he whispered, running a hand over his jaw. How the hell did this get out? Eli stood beside him, tense and quiet. His fingers drummed against the table. That article was posted 20 minutes ago. That means someone local saw us and ran with it. Daniel's mind raced. The man watching from the trees, the creaking porch boards. The timing was too perfect. Whoever it was hadn't just been passing by. They'd known what they were looking for. The wind outside picked up swirling leaves against the house. A distant rumble of thunder rolled across the hills, and somewhere in the woods, a dog barked. Once, then stopped. Eli looked toward the vault door, still propped open behind them. We should close it. Daniel nodded. Yeah. They moved quickly, sealing both vaults and sliding the bookcase back into position. The switch, hidden inside the gambler, clicked off with a soft, mechanical whine. Should we hide the note? Eli asked. Daniel held Lorraine's handwriting in his palm. His fingers tightened around it. No. If someone gets this far, it's already too late. They didn't say much after that. Eli retreated upstairs to charge what was left of his cracked tablet. Daniel sat on the couch, hands buried in his hair. He'd thought this would be quiet, private, maybe even healing. But now the world knew his name. And that kind of money didn't just attract attention. It attracted expectation, greed, and worse. He pulled out his phone and called Kensington, straight to voicemail. He left a message, calm, measured, barely masking the worry in his voice. By late afternoon, the rain had stopped. Mist clung to the ground like breath held too long. Daniel and Eli moved room to room, making sure all doors were locked, windows secured. As they passed through the hallway near the library, something caught Daniel's eye. A panel in the wall, barely visible. A slight seam in the wallpaper. "Eli," he called. "Bring me that flashlight." The panel was old, maybe part of the original build. No handle, but a faint indent where fingers might pry it open. Daniel knelt down and wedged his fingers in. With a groan of aged wood, it gave way. Behind it was a narrow chute of stairs, stone steps leading downward. Dust billowed into his face. "You think this goes to the basement?" Eli asked, peering over his dad's shoulder. Daniel frowned. "There isn't a basement listed on the house plans." "Creepy." "Yeah, that's how you know we have to check it out." They grabbed a lantern from the garage, one of the old crank-powered kinds, and began their descent. The air grew cooler. The stone steps slick with age. At the bottom, the tunnel opened into a small chamber walls lined with shelves, and in the center, an old metal desk. Rusted, covered in dust. A banker's lamp still clinging to its fixture. Daniel stepped in heart-thudding. On the desk sat a single item, a worn leather journal bound with a broken strap. He opened it slowly. Page 1 for Daniel. The part they weren't supposed to find. His throat dried instantly. The journal wasn't Lorraine's handwriting. It was Kenny's. The entries were dated between 2001 and 2016. Pages of thoughts, regrets, business dealings, and something deeper, more personal. "I told her it wasn't fair, that she deserved to be seen. But she never wanted the spotlight. Said it only burned when you got too close. She saved me over and over again. We made investments they never knew about. Quiet buys, back channels, land with oil leases in Oklahoma, real estate flips under dummy corporations. She never got the credit but the money. That was hers. They'll come for it someday. The ones who think fame entitles them to fortune. The label, the cousins, even old friends. But it wasn't theirs. It was ours." Daniel flipped faster now. Deeper in the entries, got darker. Names, deals, a mention of a dispute, an unnamed man threatening legal action in 2013. Eli leaned over his shoulder. "Are we in danger?" Daniel closed the journal. "I don't know yet." But in his gut, he felt it. Something was wrong. Something about this fortune, about this place, was more tangled than he'd been told. And someone out there wanted it. They climbed back up the stairs, sealing the panel behind them. Daniel placed the journal in a fireproof box they'd found in Lorraine's closet. Locked it. Hid the key under a floorboard. Just after dusk, a knock came at the door. Daniel froze. Eli peeked through the side curtain. It's a woman. Alone. Says her name's Clara. Daniel let out a breath. He opened the door. Clara Wade stood there, damp from the mist trench coat, wrapped tight, eyes tired. "I got your message," she said. "And then I saw the news." Daniel stepped aside to let her in. "Did you tell anyone?" he asked. "Absolutely not," she said, pulling off her coat. "But that leak didn't come from our office. It was someone local. I'd bet money on it." Daniel nodded. "We were being watched." Clara's face darkened. "You'll need to start thinking about security. Real security. This is no longer a private matter, Mr. Brooks. This is a public estate now." "What does that mean?" Eli asked, stepping into the room. "It means," Clara said carefully, "you're going to be challenged. The will might be contested. The assets might be frozen. And if there's anyone with a reason or a story, they're going to come knocking." Daniel crossed his arms. Why would someone challenge it? "It's Lorraine's signature. Her trust. Her vault." Clara hesitated. Then she said the words that pulled the air straight from the room. Because Lorraine wasn't the only one listed on those offshore accounts. Daniel's heart stopped. What? There's a second name on one of the largest trusts, but it's been redacted, sealed by private order, by who she met his eyes. Kenny Rogers. Silence fell between them. Eli asked, "Does that mean someone else owns half of all this?" Clara shook her head. "Not necessarily, but it means someone else may believe they do. And when money's involved, belief is enough to start a war." Daniel sat down slowly. His head spun. "So what do we do?" Clara took a breath. "You stay here. You protect what's yours. And whatever you found down there," she nodded toward the sealed bookcase, "you don't breathe a word of it. Not until we know who else is listening." Daniel nodded, his jaw clenched. "Trust is a currency," he said quietly. "And right now, I don't have enough to spend." That night, long after Clara had left, Daniel stood on the porch, eyes scanning the tree line. And deep in the pines, 2 headlights flickered just long enough for him to know someone was still watching. The flicker of headlights disappeared just as quickly as they'd appeared, swallowed by the pine-thick shadows surrounding the house. Daniel didn't move. He stood at the porch railing, his breath visible in the cool night air, eyes pinned to the spot where the glow had been. His pulse thudded against his ribs like a warning. He wasn't imagining it. Someone was still out there. He turned back inside, locked the door, and slid the deadbolt into place. The air in the house had changed. It felt like they were no longer the only ones in the story, like invisible eyes had stepped into the margins, watching, calculating, waiting. Upstairs, Eli sat cross-legged on the bed, headphones in face bathed in the blue light of his tablet. When Daniel entered, he paused the video and took out one bud. More headlights. Daniel nodded grimly. Same spot. They're not just curious. They're scoping the place. Eli looked down at the blanket balled in his lap. "You think they know about the vault?" Daniel leaned against the doorframe. "They know something. Enough to be dangerous." Eli hesitated. "Do you think Grandma Lorraine meant for this to happen, for us to find all of this, and then be hunted for it?" Daniel didn't answer right away. He sat down next to him. "I don't think she wanted us hunted," he said quietly. "But I do think she knew secrets don't stay buried forever." Outside, the wind had picked up again. It howled between the gaps in the shutters as if the house itself was whispering warnings. The next morning brought more than fog and restless nerves. It brought Sheriff Wendell Ray. Daniel heard the knock around 8 a.m., sharp and persistent. He opened the door to find the sheriff standing on the porch. Sunglasses perched low on his nose, hand resting lightly on the grip of his holstered gun. "Mornin', Mr. Brooks," he said, giving a nod. "Mind if I come in?" Daniel stepped aside. "Not at all." Wendell was in his 50s, stocky and moved with the weight of a man who'd seen enough small-town trouble to know what didn't add up. He didn't take off his sunglasses when he entered. "Got a few calls last night," the sheriff said. "Locals think you've got people poking around the woods." Flashlights. Truck parked a quarter-mile down the old gas road. Daniel tensed. "We saw headlights. Didn't get a clear look." Sheriff Ray nodded like he expected that. "You got any cameras on this place?" "Not yet. I'd fix that real soon. This house might have been abandoned a while, but folks around here haven't forgotten it. Especially now that your name's been plastered across the internet like you just won the lottery." Daniel didn't react. "I didn't ask for the attention. I'm not saying you did. But attention doesn't care what you asked for." Ray looked around the room. "Place looks pretty good considering. Heard it used to be Roger's hideout back in the day." Y'all fixin' to stay long? Daniel hesitated. Depends. On whether people stop showing up at my tree line in the middle of the night. Ray smirked slightly, then grew serious. Just sayin', Mr. Brooks, things around here aren't always what they look like. Some folks think they've got claims on this property. Got history, memories, even rumors of what's buried under it. Daniel didn't blink. Rumors. Old-timers say Kenny kept things here that were, let's say, off the books. Collectibles, cash, gold records, maybe more. You inheriting this place stirred the pot. The room fell quiet. Ray slid a business card onto the coffee table. My cell's on the back. You hear anything strange or someone tries to talk you into a deal that smells funny, you call me. Daniel nodded. I appreciate it. Ray tipped his hat. Just watch your back, son. Shadows in this town got long memories. After he left, Daniel locked the door again and called Clara. He explained the visit, the sighting, the sheriff's warnings. Clara didn't sound surprised. Wendell's a good man. Old school, but not a bad ally to have. Keep him close, but don't tell him everything. What about the redacted name? Daniel asked. Any progress? She sighed. Not yet. The trust is shielded by a private LLC based in Nevada. Legal firewall. But I'm working on it. Daniel paced the living room. We don't have time. Whoever that name belongs to, they might already be here. They might. Clara admitted. But listen to me, you need to act like the money doesn't exist. Like the vault isn't real. If someone's watching, the less they see, the better. Daniel nodded despite the pit in his stomach. That night, Eli slept with a bat beside his bed. Daniel stayed up, flashlight and hammer on the table, watching the woods through a slit in the curtain. At 1:12 a.m., he saw it again. A figure. Not just headlights this time. Someone standing beneath a pine tree at the edge of the clearing. Still. Watching. Daniel grabbed the flashlight and stepped out onto the porch, rage cutting through fear. Hey, he shouted. You want something? Come out and ask. The figure didn't move. Daniel stepped forward. The beam of his flashlight cut through the mist, but by the time he reached the edge of the yard, the figure was gone. But something else was there. A paper, folded and tucked into the bark of a tree, weighted with a rusted nail. Daniel pulled it free and unfolded it. It was a single sentence written in block letters. You're not the only one she made promises to. Daniel stared at the words. His chest tightened. She hadn't just left something for him. She'd left something behind. Something someone else believed belonged to them. Back inside, Daniel stood in the vault room, with the letter still in his hand. He opened Lorraine's journal again, scanning for anything he'd missed. And there it was. An entry dated 6 months before her death. I told him no. Again. But he'll come back. He always does. I just hope Daniel gets here first. Daniel couldn't sleep. The letter from the tree sat on the table like a threat wrapped in paper. You're not the only one she made promises to. The words echoed louder the longer he stared at them. His grandmother had written about someone persistent, someone she'd told no more than once, someone who wasn't used to hearing that word. The storm outside had passed, but the tension inside the house only thickened. Every creak in the walls, every shift in the wind, made Daniel feel like he was being watched, even now from the trees or from the past. Downstairs, the house felt colder than usual. The kind of cold that settles in your bones. Daniel walked to the bookshelf, hesitated, then flipped the hidden switch again. The mechanical click was sharper this time, like the house itself was sighing open. He stepped back into the vault, alone. The low hum of temperature control filled the air. He flicked the light on and pulled open Lorraine's journal again, thumbing back to the entry he'd found. I told him no. Again. But he'll come back. He always does. I just hope Daniel gets here first. Who the hell was he? Daniel muttered. Next to the journal sat the black notebook Kenny had written in. He opened it and searched for any mention of tension, any argument, any warning signs. And then he saw it. August 2013. Lorraine said she received another letter from him. Same tone, same threat. Says she owes him. Says he kept the secret just like they agreed. I told her I'd handle it, but she told me no. She didn't want blood on her conscience. Neither do I. But if he comes back again, I'm not playing nice. Daniel stared at the page. There had been someone else involved in the original deals. Someone Kenny and Lorraine both wanted to keep quiet. Someone dangerous enough that Kenny Rogers had considered handling him by force. He needed answers. He needed to hear Lorraine's voice again. Back upstairs, Eli was still asleep, curled up beneath a quilt with a flashlight by his hand and a notebook filled with sketches of the house and hidden compartments. Daniel smiled faintly, then turned toward the far end of the hall. The attic. Lorraine's tapes had been stored there. Maybe, just maybe, her voice had said more than what she'd written. Daniel climbed the attic stairs and pulled the string for the overhead bulb. The dim light bathed the space in amber shadow. Dust floated like slow snowflakes. He found the shoebox where they'd stashed the cassette labeled 1998, Thanksgiving. Taped to the inside of the lid was a smaller one for Daniel, play only when ready. He stared at it. His hands trembled as he slipped the tape into the old cassette player. He pressed play. There was a soft click followed by silence. Then her voice. Warm, tired, but unmistakably Lorraine. Daniel, honey. If you're listening to this, I guess you finally made it to the house. I hope it didn't scare you too bad. I know it's big and creaky and smells like dust and old wood and secrets. But it's ours, yours now. Daniel sank to the floor, knees folding beneath him. I'm sorry I wasn't there when you were growing up. I fought hard to be. But your mama, she made her choices. I respected them even when they broke my heart. But you need to know something important, baby. Everything I built here, it wasn't just luck. I worked. I watched. I learned. And I protected things people would have taken if I blinked. There was a pause, the sound of a breath. There's a man named Barrett. If he comes looking, you shut that door and you don't answer. He thinks I owed him. Thinks Kenny owed him too. He's wrong, but wrong people don't usually stop just because they're wrong. Daniel froze. Barrett. A name. Finally. He might come with papers. He might come with a smile. But everything he wants leads to that vault. And there are things in there that don't belong to him. You were always meant to carry this forward, to fix what we couldn't. Not just money, but legacy. Truth. The tape clicked softly again. Then her voice returned, quieter now. I loved you, even from far away. I just hope this doesn't become a burden. But if it does, fight smart. Don't trust easy, and never let anyone make you feel like this wasn't meant for you. Click. Silence. Daniel exhaled, chest shaking. Barrett. The name settled like a bruise. He pulled his phone out and ran a search. Dozens of results came up, but one stood out. Garrison Barrett, 68, former music executive, dissolved Rogers Barrett Productions, 2001. That was the year Kenny started turning assets over to Lorraine. It made sense. If Barrett had been his partner, and then Kenny split off to give Lorraine her share, Barrett might have felt entitled to something he no longer controlled. And if he'd stayed quiet all these years waiting, maybe he'd finally decided to make his move. Downstairs, Daniel poured a glass of water with shaking hands. He called Clara. "You ever hear of a man named Garrison Barrett?" There was a pause on the line. "Yeah," she said. "I have. Old school producer. Bad reputation. Why, he's the one Lorraine warned me about. He's the one who thinks this place, this money is partly his." Clara swore under her breath. "I'll dig into it," she said. "But if that's true, we're going to have a very ugly fight on our hands. Barrett's not the kind of man who goes away quietly." Daniel's eyes drifted to the porch, to the trees. "I don't think he ever left," he said. That night, he and Eli moved their mattresses into the same room. Safety in numbers. They kept the lights on, the tape player nearby, and Daniel kept Lorraine's voice playing in his mind like armor. The next morning, an envelope arrived at the front door. No postage, no name, just a single page inside. Typed. "To the current occupant of 167 Pine Hollow Road, you are in unlawful possession of assets belonging to the Rogers Barrett Trust. You have 72 hours to vacate the premises and relinquish all contents of the estate." G. Barrett Daniel crushed the page in his hand, fire rising in his chest. So it had begun. Daniel picked up the phone and called Clara again. His voice was steel. "If he wants a fight, we'll give him one. But this time, we're not fighting in the dark." The envelope sat on the kitchen table like a loaded gun, silent but full of intent. Daniel stared at it, arms crossed, his mind racing. G. Barrett wasn't bluffing. This wasn't some vague warning or anonymous threat. It was a declaration of war. And Barrett had just fired the first shot. Daniel picked up the phone and dialed Clara. She answered on the first ring. "He gave us 72 hours, he said. Typed letter. No signature, but it's him." "I figured this was coming," Clara replied, her voice taut. "I spoke with an investigator I trust. Barrett's been sniffing around Fitzgerald for weeks. Looking at records, interviewing people, even trying to reach out to Kenny's old staff. He's building a case." Daniel felt a chill move through him, despite the rising Georgia sun outside. Can he actually take this from us? Not legally. Not if what Lorraine left is solid. But that's not how people like him work, Daniel. He won't start with the law. He'll try to scare you out first. Then if that fails, he'll drag you through court so long and so hard that you'll bleed money just to keep standing. Daniel didn't flinch. "Then we stand anyway." Clara's tone softened, impressed. "That's what I needed to hear. I'm coming down tomorrow morning, with documents. We're going to draw some lines." When he hung up, Eli stepped into the kitchen. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, hoodie pulled over his head like armor. "Did I hear you say someone's taking us to court?" "Not yet," Daniel said. "But they're threatening to." Eli picked up the crumpled envelope and looked it over like it might bite him. "So this guy Barrett, he's what some old man trying to steal our house. He's more than that," Daniel said. "He was Kenny's business partner once. Probably helped build a lot of what's down in that vault. Then Kenny and Lorraine cut him out. And he never forgot." Eli's mouth pressed into a line. so now he's trying to steal it back. From us. Daniel nodded. And he's not going to play fair. The rest of the day was spent preparing. Clara sent a courier with notarized documents, a full audit of Lorraine's assets, a certified copy of the handwritten will, and a stack of trust paperwork that confirmed the legitimacy of Daniel's inheritance. Still, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling they were fortifying a castle made of glass. Late that night, after Eli had gone to bed, there was another knock at the door. This time, it wasn't a stranger. It was Miles, the neighbor from 2 properties over. He stood on the porch with a weather-beaten face and a crooked smile, holding a thermos of black coffee. "Figured you could use this," Miles said. "Word travels fast out here." Daniel accepted the thermos, unsure. "You heard." "Everybody's heard," Miles said. "Barrett's name is like a ghost around here. Shows up every couple of years, makes noise, stirs trouble, then disappears before anyone can pin him down." Daniel frowned. "You know him personally?" "Long time ago," Miles admitted. "I was part of the grounds crew when Kenny was still recording. Barrett used to come down in a big black SUV yelling at everyone like he owned the world." "What kind of trouble did he stir?" Miles hesitated. "There was a rumor that he was hiding money. Big money. But when Kenny and Lorraine locked things up, Barrett was cut out. Some folks think there was a second vault, something even Kenny didn't have full access to. Lorraine did." Daniel went cold. "A vault behind the vault." Miles looked at him closely. "All I know is Lorraine had secrets. Good ones. Quiet ones. But she always said, 'What matters is who you trust when the lights go out.'" Daniel tightened his grip on the thermos. "That phrase, it was in the journal." He nodded slowly. "Thanks for the coffee, Miles." The old man tipped his cap. "Be careful, Daniel. Barrett doesn't just fight with lawsuits. He fights with people. Real people. And they're already here." The next morning, Clara arrived just after 9 a.m., dressed in navy slacks, boots, and a leather folder under her arm like it was a weapon. She didn't waste time. "We have a situation," she said, walking in without waiting. "Barrett's lawyer filed a motion this morning to place an emergency freeze on all of Lorraine's assets." Daniel's heart dropped. "He's already in court," Clara nodded. "It's strategic. He knows he can't win. But if he can tie everything up in probate court, he can make your life miserable, and he can try to manipulate a judge into allowing a third-party audit." "Which would give him access," Daniel said bitterly. "Exactly. And if he finds anything at all that looks shady or undocumented, he'll pounce." Daniel set down his coffee. "What's our move?" Clara spread out the paperwork. "We counter with a full submission of Lorraine's records, including what's in the vault. But we keep the original ledger and tapes hidden for now. They're not legally required yet." And Barrett Eli asked from the doorway. He had come down quietly, listening. Clara looked at him. "He's going to push harder. But you two have something he doesn't." "What's that?" Eli asked. She smiled faintly. "You have the truth. And you have the house. That still means something." But later that day, the ambush hit. A black Escalade pulled into the driveway. Daniel watched from the window as 3 sharply dressed men stepped out. One carried a briefcase. One had a Bluetooth headset clipped to his ear. The third didn't say a word, just stood near the back bumper watching. Barrett wasn't among them. Clara answered the door with Daniel beside her. The lead attorney introduced himself as Graham Voss, representing Garrison Barrett. "Mr. Brooks," he said with a smile so polite, it felt like venom. "We'd like to extend a final offer before formal litigation begins." Daniel crossed his arms. "You can turn around and drive back to whatever rock you came from." Graham chuckled. "Very dramatic, but unnecessary. Our offer is generous. You walk away with $2 million, tax-free. You sign over all rights to the estate, and this all goes away." Clara stepped forward. "You're bluffing. You know your client doesn't have a legal leg to stand on." Graham's eyes narrowed slightly. "We'll see what a judge thinks. But here's what I know: fighting us will cost you time, money, attention. Your son doesn't need to grow up under siege, does he?" Daniel didn't hesitate. He stepped forward and stared Graham down. "You tell your boss this. We're not for sale. Not the house, not the vault, not our name." Graham's smile vanished. He reached into his briefcase, pulled out a folder, and handed it to Clara. "Then I guess we'll see you in court." The men turned and walked back to the SUV, which disappeared down the road a moment later. Daniel closed the door behind them. "Now we know who we're dealing with," he said, voice low. Clara flipped open the folder. Inside were copies of sealed court records, records Daniel hadn't seen before. And at the bottom, a name Lorraine had never mentioned: Eli's mother. Clara stared at the folder, silent. Her brow furrowed deeper with every page she flipped through, as if the papers inside were unraveling more than just legal history, like they were unspooling a bomb. Daniel watched her dread rising up his spine. She finally looked up, her voice flat. "You need to sit down." He didn't. She handed him the folder. Daniel took one glance and the room spun. At the top of the page, petition for guardianship transfer. Georgia Family Court, 2009. Filed by Naomi Brooks, his ex-wife. Eli's mother. He flipped through it, hands growing numb. There were records of conversations between Naomi and Lorraine. Mentions of an inheritance too large to entrust without oversight. A clause buried deep indicating Naomi had requested limited custodial rights over Lorraine's estate in the event of her passing. "What is this?" as Daniel asked, voice sharp. Clara took a slow breath. "It's an old legal filing. It was sealed, but Barrett somehow got access. My guess, he's going to argue that Naomi has a stronger claim to the estate than you because she filed this and because she was technically in contact with Lorraine about it years ago." "But Naomi hasn't been in our lives for a decade," Daniel snapped. "She abandoned Eli. She didn't want anything to do with us." "She didn't," Clara agreed. "But that won't stop Barrett from using her as a wedge. If he can convince the court that your claim is muddied, that you weren't the primary heir, or that Lorraine's mental state was questionable when she signed the will, he has a shot." Daniel closed the folder slowly, every joint in his hand stiff. "He found her, didn't he?" Clara nodded. "I believe so." A long silence followed. Eli entered the room from the hallway, sensing the shift in energy. "What happened?" Daniel hesitated. "Your mom might be part of this now." Eli didn't say anything for a long moment. He just stared, and when he finally spoke, it was in a voice that trembled with something sharp. "She's not coming back because she cares. She's coming back because of the money." Daniel clenched his jaw. "I know." Eli's eyes darkened. "So what are we going to do about it?" Daniel turned back to Clara. "What are our options?" Clara leaned against the kitchen counter, arms crossed. "We can preemptively file to reaffirm the will and inheritance. But it's risky. If we do that, we're basically telling the court there is a threat to your claim. It opens the door, gives Barrett a foothold." Daniel exhaled hard through his nose. "So we wait." "Not exactly," Clara said. "We prepare. We gather everything we can. proof of your relationship with Lorraine, her health history, any recordings, especially the tape she made for you." "I have it," Daniel said. "It's personal." Clara's eyes softened for a second. "I know, but it's also powerful. A judge would have a hard time dismissing the intent of a woman who made a direct message for her heir." "I'll get it ready," Daniel said. Eli crossed the room. "Can I help?" Daniel looked at his son. He was too young for this, too young to carry the weight of legal warfare and old ghosts. But his eyes were clear, focused. "Yeah," Daniel said. "You can." They spent the rest of the day gathering everything: photographs, letters, Lorraine's medical records, the bank ledgers, the title transfers. Clara reviewed everything with a legal eye, sorting them into folders, stamping them with notes, building a wall of evidence strong enough to push back the flood. But as the sun dipped low, another message arrived. This time it wasn't from Barrett. It was from Naomi. Daniel saw her name flash across his phone screen, and for a moment he couldn't move. Then he picked up and walked outside, away from Eli. He answered. "Naomi." A pause. Then her voice. "Hi, Daniel." Her voice hadn't changed. Still smooth, still calculated. "I assume you know why I'm calling," she said. "I do." Another pause. "I didn't want to do this. But Barrett said I still have a claim. And if it's true, I can't ignore it." "You walked away from us," Daniel said, his tone low. "You left Eli when he was 4. You gave up every right you had." "I never gave up everything," she said sharply. "Lorraine and I, before I left, we talked about a trust. She said she wanted to make sure I was taken care of." Daniel nearly laughed. "This isn't about care. This is about cash." "Call it what you want," Naomi said. "But I'm coming back to Georgia, and I'm filing with Barrett." Daniel's hand curled around the phone. "Don't do this to Eli." She hesitated. "Then tell him to stay out of it," she said. "This fight's not about him. He's already in it." She hung up. Daniel lowered the phone and stood still for a long time, the cool night air sinking deep into his skin. When he went back inside, Eli was sitting on the couch, arms folded. "She's coming, isn't she?" he asked. Daniel sat next to him. "Yeah, she is." Eli didn't speak, but his jaw set hard, and when he finally looked up, he said something Daniel hadn't expected. "I don't care what she says. I'm not going with her, and I'm not letting her take what Grandma gave us." Daniel's chest ached with pride and pain. "You won't have to," he said. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep again. He walked the house, checking every window, every lock. His mind drifted not just to Naomi or Barrett, but to Lorraine, to what she must have known was coming. In the vault, Daniel pulled out the tape recorder again. He replayed the last part of her message. "They'll try to break you, Daniel. But you weren't made to break. You were made to build. Hold the line." The next morning, a knock came at the door. Clara opened it. A woman in a navy suit handed her an envelope. Subpoena. Barrett had filed for full injunction. The court battle had officially begun. The envelope was thick, heavy, like a storm pressed into paper. Clara held it between her fingers without opening it, staring at the seal like it might bite. Daniel stood across from her, heart already sinking. "It's official," Clara said. Barrett filed a motion for full injunction. He's requesting temporary control over the estate pending an investigation. Daniel didn't move. "On what grounds?" Clara broke the seal and unfolded the contents. Her eyes scanned the lines, her expression darkening. Allegations of fraud, concealment of assets, and undue influence over Lorraine in her final year. He's claiming your relationship with her was exploitative, that she wasn't of sound mind when she wrote the trust. Daniel's jaw tightened. That's a lie. Doesn't matter, Clara said. He's not trying to prove truth, he's trying to cast doubt. Enough doubt to freeze everything, then bleed us in court. Eli walked into the room, still in his hoodie, holding a crumpled granola bar. So, they're trying to say you manipulated Grandma. Daniel looked at his son, the heat rising in his chest. Yeah. That. I somehow tricked her into leaving us this house, the vault, everything. Eli shook his head, disgusted. That's insane. Clara nodded. We'll fight it. But it means everything's now evidence, including the vault, including the journal, including that tape. Daniel swallowed. Even the tape. Clara didn't flinch. Especially the tape. A first-hand voice recording from Lorraine. It's the strongest piece of intent we've got. Daniel rubbed a hand over his face. Then we use it. Clara nodded once. I'm going to file a response with the court today. But listen, there's something else you need to know. She pulled another sheet from the folder. This subpoena, it includes a demand for discovery. That means Barrett's team will be allowed to search the house under supervision, of course, for anything not disclosed. Daniel went still. They'll come inside. They'll look for documents, files, anything that could prove or disprove the will's validity. Daniel didn't speak for a moment. Then he said quietly, There's a second chamber beneath the vault. I haven't told anyone. Not even you. Clara looked up sharply. Is it part of the inheritance? I think it's something Lorraine and Kenny hid from everyone. Even the law. Clara's voice dropped. Then we need to keep it that way. If it's not in the documents and we reveal it now, Barrett will argue it's concealed assets. You'd be opening a door you can't close. Daniel nodded. I won't let them find it. But deep down he knew it was only a matter of time. They had 48 hours to prepare before the search. Daniel and Eli spent the day boxing up everything they wanted to protect. Clara made copies of the tape. Daniel moved the originals, the tapes, the journal, the keys to a hidden crawl space in the attic, sealed beneath a rotted floorboard Lorraine once told him never to fix. That night, Eli couldn't sleep. He sat at the dining room table with an old photograph of Lorraine and Kenny both laughing mid-song at a campfire. Eli stared at it like it was a relic from another world. She believed in us, he said. Daniel nodded from the kitchen. She trusted us. Eli looked up. So why does it feel like the world's trying to take that away? Daniel came over and knelt in front of him. Because people don't fight for things they don't want. And this place, what it represents, scares them. It's not just money. It's the truth. Eli looked down again. Then we fight back with the truth. Daniel smiled, pride flickering behind his tired eyes. Exactly. The next morning they woke to the sound of tires crunching gravel. 2 SUVs. One marked with the county seal. One black and unmarked. Barrett didn't come himself. But his lawyer Graham Voss was back along with 2 assistants and a neutral court observer. Clara met them at the door, clipboard in hand, ready for battle. Daniel stood beside her, calm on the surface. Mr. Brooks, Graham said smoothly, we appreciate your cooperation. We'll be as non-invasive as possible. You're not welcome here, Daniel said evenly. But I'm going to let you in because I have nothing to hide. Graham offered a smirk. I'm glad you understand. The search began. They moved room to room, taking photographs, cataloging documents, scanning bookshelves for hidden compartments. Graham spent an uncomfortable amount of time in the library, running fingers along the spines of the first editions. Daniel watched every step like a hawk. At one point, Eli caught one of the assistants trying to photograph Lorraine's jewelry box. "Back off," Eli said coldly. "That's not yours." Clara stepped in immediately. "That's personal property, not subject to the injunction." Graham raised his hands. "Apologies. We're just being thorough." But Daniel could see it. They weren't looking for paperwork. They were looking for leverage. At last they came to the vault room. Daniel hesitated, then pulled the switch behind the book. The shelf slid aside. The vault stood open, but only the outer one. The deeper chamber below remained sealed behind the stone wall untouched. Inside the main vault, Daniel had arranged only what he was willing to share: financial records, Lorraine's taped message copied on a flash drive, a box of family documents neatly labeled. Graham surveyed the space. "This is extensive," he said. "She was a meticulous woman," Daniel said. "She wanted everything documented." The court observer took inventory. Everything was logged. No mention of a second vault. As they prepared to leave, Graham turned to Daniel with a smile like a wolf. "You've made a good show of transparency, but you and I both know this is only the surface." Daniel stared back. "Careful, counselor. You keep digging, you might find things you wish you hadn't." Graham's smirk faltered just slightly. Then they were gone. As the SUVs disappeared down the road, Daniel turned to Clara. "How bad is it? They'll use every inch of what they found against you," she said. "But they didn't find the heart of it." Daniel exhaled. "Then we still have a chance." Eli stepped onto the porch beside them. Clara turned to him. "You okay?" He looked between them. "If they want to know what Lorraine left us, we should show them everything." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Even the second vault," Eli nodded. "If this goes to trial, that's where the real story is. That's what she wanted us to protect." Daniel looked at Clara. She hesitated, then said, "If we do this, we need to do it right. On our terms, in front of the judge. Let them try to bury us in paper. We'll bury them in truth." Daniel led them down the old stone stairs, that night Eli behind him with the flashlight. And as he pulled open the concealed wall revealing the second vault's entrance, he whispered, "She didn't hide this to keep it from the world. She hid it to save it for the right moment." The stone wall groaned open with a low, ancient sound that sent shivers through the silence. Dust danced in the beam of Eli's flashlight as Daniel stepped through the narrow passage, his heart thudding like a drumbeat in his chest. Clara followed behind, her breath slow and sharp eyes sweeping every corner. The second vault had not seen daylight in decades. The walls were lined with cedar and reinforced steel, the air still and dry. At its center sat a large wooden trunk, hand-carved, worn smooth at the edges, its lid marked with Lorraine's initials. Daniel knelt before it, his fingers tracing the letters like a prayer. He looked back at Eli and Clara. Then he opened it. Inside was not gold, not stacks of cash, but papers, tapes, film reels, a treasure trove of documentation, contracts, photos, a map of Kenny's original recording compound with annotations in Lorraine's handwriting, a journal thicker than the others with the word truth etched across the cover. Clara stepped forward, lifting a reel carefully. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Is this what I think it is?" Daniel nodded. "I think this is the story they never told. As they sifted through the contents, the pieces began to fall into place. Barrett hadn't just been cut out of a business deal, he had orchestrated an elaborate scheme in the 1980s to funnel millions into offshore accounts, hiding money under Kenny and Lorraine's name. When Kenny found out, he'd threatened to go public. Lorraine had begged him not to for the sake of the artists, the label, the families that would have collapsed under the scandal. So instead, they sealed it away. Not to protect Barrett, but to protect what was left of the good they had built. The documents proved everything: embezzlement, manipulation, a quiet payout, to silence one of Kenny's producers who had caught wind of it. There were even letters from Barrett, coercive, desperate, demanding restitution. Lorraine had kept them all. Clara sat on the cold stone floor, sorting through the mountain of evidence. "This is it," she said. "This isn't just our defense, it's the truth. Barrett's not suing you to reclaim money he lost. He's suing you to keep this from coming out." Daniel nodded slowly. "And now we have the power to make it right." The trial began 2 weeks later. The courtroom was packed. Local press buzzed with stories about Kenny Rogers' secret vaults and a long-lost inheritance caught in legal fire. Barrett showed up in a tailored suit and a smug expression, flanked by Graham Voss and a legal team dressed for war. Daniel walked in with Clara and Eli at his side. Steady, focused, quiet fire behind their eyes. When Clara presented Lorraine's tapes, the room stilled. The jury leaned in. The judge frowned, then nodded slowly as Lorraine's voice filled the courtroom, calm and strong and unshaken by time. "If they ever come for you, Daniel, don't be afraid. The truth doesn't need to shout, it just needs to stand." When the tapes ended, Clara unveiled the documents from the second vault. The judge raised his eyebrows. Barrett's lawyer scrambled to object, but it was too late. The paper trail told a story that no amount of spin could erase. By the end of the week, the case collapsed. Barrett's petition was denied. His actions were referred to the state attorney general for further review. And Daniel Brooks was reaffirmed as the sole legal heir to the estate of Lorraine Everly. Outside the courthouse, Daniel stood before a sea of microphones, Eli beside him, hand in hand. He looked out at the crowd and spoke not like a man who'd won, but like one who'd finally understood the weight of what he carried. "My grandmother didn't leave me a fortune," he said. "She left me a responsibility. To protect what she couldn't fix. To finish what she started. She kept the truth locked away not because she was afraid, but because she was waiting for someone who wouldn't run from it." He paused, his voice steady. "This house isn't just ours now. It's a place where truth lives, where stories are kept safe even when the world tries to bury them." Reporters asked questions. Flashes burst, but Daniel and Eli walked past them, not with defiance, but with peace. Back home, the sun cast golden light over the pines. The mansion no longer felt haunted. It felt awake. The vaults were resealed not to hide them, but to preserve them. Clara helped set up a foundation in Lorraine's name, the Everly Trust. Its mission would be to support transparency in the music industry, to give young artists legal support and historical education, and to open the archives to the public one day. Miles helped with the land restoration. Sarah, the local historian, began cataloging the materials. And Eli, for the first time, talked about maybe becoming a writer, someone who keeps stories alive. Late one evening, Daniel sat on the porch, watching the sky bleed pink into purple. Eli came out and sat next to him. "I don't think she was afraid when she died," Eli said suddenly. Daniel looked over. "No." Eli shook his head. "I think she knew we'd find it. All of it. That we'd know what to do." Daniel smiled. "Maybe she did." They sat in silence for a while, cicadas humming, wind moving through the trees like breath. Then Eli said, "You remember what she said?" On the tape, Daniel nodded. "Yeah, the truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs to stand." And that's what they did. They stood. Even when the past tried to break through the floorboards, even when ghosts returned in expensive suits, even when fear knocked on their door in the middle of the night, they stood. And in the end, it wasn't the money that mattered. It was the legacy of courage. The kind passed down not through blood, but through action, through quiet defiance, through stories that refused to die. Because some homes aren't built with walls and windows. They're built with truth. And truth once unearthed never goes quietly.